If you're ready to start taking payments and want to get up and running quickly, this is a great place to start. We'll show how to pull and run an example locally and then deploy that MVP to a DigitalOcean droplet using Dokku. Whether you're an indie hacker working on spinning up a side project or a dev working for a multinational online marketplace, accepting payments is a critical component of your business. So today you'll see some of the open source tools and we'll share some tips that will hopefully save you some time and help jumpstart your integration. I'm CJ Avila, a developer advocate at Stripe, and I help folks with their integrations. So while challenging to find the silver lining, it's been my favorite part of quarantine to either write code outside, either with these tree friends or in a hammock. All right, so there's a couple options for collecting payment details from customers with Stripe. You'll typically either use Stripe Elements or Stripe Checkout. Elements are a set of pre-built components that you can use to build your own custom payment form on the web. Stripe Checkout, on the other hand, is a Stripe-hosted page that, among other things, can collect payment details from the customer for you. And so today we're going to use Stripe Checkout. Stripe Checkout is awesome because it's optimized for mobile and supports mobile wallets like Apple Pay and Google Pay. It's localized in over 25 languages and you can customize it for your brand. It can be used to take a one-time payment, as we'll see today, or to start a subscription to collect payments on a recurring basis. Checkout's also the quickest way to start taking payments in a conversion-optimized way. So accepting payments with Stripe Checkout consists of two steps. First, creating a checkout session for what your customer intends to purchase. And second, redirecting your customer to a Stripe-hosted payment form to complete their purchase. Later, you can optionally add Webhook Handler to automate fulfillment of a purchase. So this is an example of creating a checkout session on the server. Here we're using the Stripe Node client library. First, we initialize an instance of the client with our secret key, and then we make an API call to create the checkout session object. Once the response is returned from the API and that promise resolves, the session variable will contain the data, including an ID that's used to redirect from the front end. So it's at this session creation time that we can configure what the customer is paying for. So for instance, we might change that mode from payment to subscription, to start a subscription, or we might add ideal to the list of those supported payment method types. This is an example of redirecting to checkout on the front end. We're using Stripe.js here, and first we initialize an instance of the Stripe object using our publishable key, and then we call redirect to checkout and pass the ID of the session that we got back from the API earlier. So for most cases, this is actually the only code that's required on the front end and is purely for redirecting to that checkout session. So before we get started, you'll want to go create accounts with Stripe and DigitalOcean if you haven't already. We'll install and configure the Stripe CLI and a Stripe sample that will jumpstart development and then fire that up locally so we know how that works and that it's working as expected. Next, we'll use the Stripe CLI to help with creating some objects in Stripe and for testing webhooks. And finally, we'll use Dokku and a simple Docker file to deploy to a DigitalOcean droplet. Let's dive in. All right, so assuming you've got your account set up at Stripe and DigitalOcean, let's begin by installing the Stripe CLI, which is a tool that'll help you build, test, and manage your Stripe integration right from the terminal. The Stripe CLI is open source and available for macOS, Windows, and Linux for distros like Ubuntu and Debian. There are installation instructions available in the docs, and today we'll be installing using Homebrew. I'm going to say brew install Stripe CLI Stripe. And while brew is installing, I want to let you know that after installing the Stripe CLI, it's got to be paired with your Stripe account. So to do so, we're going to run Stripe login from the terminal and then grant access from the Stripe dashboard just as soon as brew's done. Okay, Stripe login, and we see a pairing code, prize fans woosporty. We open that up in the dashboard. I'm already authenticated. You might need to log in if you are not already logged into your Stripe account. I'm going to allow access and we're done. We head back to the terminal and we're good to go. We can install a Stripe sample using the CLI. If you want to see the list of supported Stripe samples, you can use the Stripe samples list command, and that'll show you all the Stripe samples. You can also go to GitHub and browse to the Stripe-samples GitHub organization to see these samples. Okay, so let's create the sample for collecting a one-time payment with checkout. We say Stripe samples create checkout one-time payments. When creating the sample, we're guided through a set of options to configure the local version so that it uses a stack we're familiar with. So today we're going to be using the client and server integration, a simple HTML client, and the Node server. Okay. All Stripe samples are full end-to-end working examples that show how to build a Stripe integration with a specific product. Today, there are more than 50 samples available on GitHub, and they all have a client and server directory, and they make use of these .env files for setting environment variables to configure the sample. So when installing with the CLI, some of the environment variables are populated for us automatically. So for this sample, we need to specify the ID of a price object. A price represents what the customer will pay and includes the amount, currency, and whether the price is recurring or not. So we'll create a price in euros today and enable our European customers to pay with card, Ideal, or Giropay. From the terminal, we can use Stripe prices create and specify the currency as euro, specify the unit amount as 1200, and the product as deploy-conf. All right, so that created a price. Now that we have a price object, we can use its ID to update our .env file and set the price ID. So I'm going to open server.env and update this price ID here with the price we just created. Note that these keys, the publishable secret and webhook secret keys that are set here, were set by the Stripe CLI when we installed. Please don't share this .env file with anyone you don't trust. These API keys are secret, should stay secret, and you should do what I say, not what I do here. I'm gonna roll these keys right after this. All right, so we've got our environment variables set up. Let's drill into that server directory and npm install those dependencies and fire up the server with npm start. Okay, we'll head over to the browser and look at our localhost 4242. Spectacular. This is the very simple UI for the Stripe sample. It allows us to click this buy button and pay for a Pasha photo in test mode with Stripe checkout. So here's what the payment flow looks like. We're redirected from our local host to Stripe. This is the Stripe checkout page. This is what the customer will see. Notice that it's branded, it supports mobile wallets like Google Pay and Apple Pay, and even handles SCA, or Secure Customer Authentication, for us. I'm going to enter some basic details and we'll get going. It's as easy as that to collect a test payment. We're redirected to a success URL which lives in our local running application. Here we are at localhost 4242. So let's dive into the code and see what's happening within the Stripe sample itself. Stopping the server and opening server.js file here so we can take a look at two of the most interesting routes. The first of which is create checkout session route. We extract the domain from the environment variables. Then we're receiving the quantity and locale from the client or from the front end. And here's where we're actually configuring the checkout session. We showed this in a slide earlier. Say for a moment that we wanted to add support for more payment method types. So here we are pulling in the payment method types from the environment variables, but let's say that we wanted to just hard code these here. So let's enable our customers to pay with credit cards, Ideal, or ShiroPay. So we can say card, Ideal, and ShiroPay. Technically, you can configure these from the .env file we edited earlier, but instead, we're just going to edit inline for demonstration. Okay. There's a number of options for configuring the checkout session, so you want to check out the Stripe API reference for the full list of available parameters here. All right. Observe also that we're sending back the ID of the checkout session here. This is the ID that we'll use on the front end to redirect a checkout. When the customer successfully pays, they'll be redirected back to this success URL we've specified. And also you'll receive a webhook event notification to automate any fulfillment. So if we head down to the webhook route that lives at the bottom of this file, this is the route that handles post requests that come from Stripe when events are fired on our account. I just wanted to quickly point out that out of the box, we're simply switching on that event type and logging to the console. We're also verifying that the webhook signature is valid. So down here, we're checking if the event type is checkout session completed, and if so, we're logging that the payment was received. All right, let's set up a Stripe listener and run through the payment process again. So in another tab here, I'm gonna run Stripe listen forward to localhost 4242/webhook. And that'll create a direct connection from Stripe to our local machine and will deliver events directly to our local server without needing to spin up any special ngrok tunnel or similar. Notice that this webhook secret here will also be populated in our .env file for us. So back in the browser, we'll go back through the demo. I stopped the server. Okay, now for reals, let's go back to the browser, localhost 4242, click buy, and take a look at what's going on here. So now you'll see that these payment methods include card, but also Ideal and ShiroPay. Pretty nice that we had to make that one small change, and now we can support more payment method types for our customers to pay in many different ways. One thing to note about Ideal and ShiroPay is that they require the currency of the price we're using to be set to euros. There's now several different payment types that are supported by checkout, each of which are worth investigating, as giving your customers more ways to pay is nice. All right, so let's enter the payment details and check our logs to see if our proof of concept webhook handler here is working. Okay. All right. So if we head back over here, we expect that the server log shows payment received. Indeed it does. And in the tab where we started the listener, we see the flow of all the different accounts that are, or events that are flowing in from our account, including this checkout session completed event. All right, I'm feeling great about how this is working locally. The next step is to deploy. All right, so first things first, let's drop a new Doku droplet into the DigitalOcean. Okay, so we're gonna say create a new droplet and then search the marketplace for Doku. All right, we're gonna pick some basic defaults for the demo and click create droplet here at the bottom. Create droplet. This usually takes a few minutes to bake, and I've already got one that is in the oven, just like those baking shows. So Doku makes it a breeze to deploy and manage web applications. It's super simple with its one-click installation. You can have your own private platform in minutes. So after creating the Doku droplet, you need to visit the IP address and click Finish Setup to finish configuring Doku. If you don't, someone could visit that page and you would have a bad day. So looks good. That was my public SSH key, and it'll be used when I'm pushing changes. So we're off to the races. We got redirected, and everything is looking good for that droplet that was sort of prepared for us. All right, so to deploy our sample, we're gonna need a couple things, a Docker file, and to set up our environment variables to work with the droplet, and then also a new webhook endpoint that points at our droplet instead of our local machine. And so while Dokku usually uses Heroku build packs for deployment, you can also use Docker's native Docker file system to define a container. All right, so let's pull down a Docker file here. So I'm gonna stop the server. All right, I've got a Docker file up on GitHub in a gist. So I'm gonna wget that thing from this URL. wgetting the Docker file. How do you pronounce wget? Let me know on Twitter at cjavdev. Is it wgetting, wgetting? So we're getting this Docker file, and let's see what it's doing. Okay, so here, the from instruction is initializing a new build stage and sets the base image to node 14, and then next we're gonna create some application directories and install dependencies, and then copy the code from the sample into those directories that play nicely in production. Next, we expose 4242 as the port where the server will run, and then finally we set up the startup command here at the bottom. All right, so the next bit here is to create a webhook endpoint. Note that when using Stripe Listen, a special webhook endpoint is created for us, and the signing secret for that webhook endpoint is automatically sort of populated in that .env file for the sample so that it just works when testing locally. Each webhook endpoint has its own signing secret. So when we create a brand new webhook, it's going to be directing to that droplet, and we'll need to use the specific webhook endpoint's signing secret in the Dokku environment. So let's create a webhook endpoint first. So we say Stripe webhook endpoints create enabled events is checkout.session.completed, and then we want to say URL is equal to the IP address again /webhook. All right, so now that we have that webhook signing secret, we're ready to configure the environment. So we're gonna, let's see, so let's go here. We want to initialize a new Git repo. Classic initial git commit message. Okay, so now we want to add the remote. So we're going to say git remote add Dokku at the IP address. Okay, that's not the IP address. The IP address is this thing. Okay, and then the name of the application, so payments. All right, let's push this up to DigitalOcean, and then we'll set our environment variables using that .env file. So we say git push Dokku master, and this will push as expected and should use that Docker file that's in the root of the project. And then we're going to say Dokku config set file and point it at that .env file, so we can actually just use the environment variables that we've already set. So we'll start with those and then overwrite just the settings that will be different when we're running the application on the droplet. So one of those settings that's different is that we're going to be using a different webhook signing secret because we have a different webhook endpoint. We're going to be using a different domain because we want to redirect to a different domain. And then finally, the static directory where the client lives is going to be in a different place so that it plays nicely in production. So the first thing we can do is Dokku config set file server.env. And that'll set up all of our .env variables that were already preset for our local version. And then we want to overwrite those with the settings that are specific to the droplet. So the next setting is going to be to set the static dir to /client. So Dokku config set static dir is equal to /client. Then we want to set the Stripe webhook secret to this thing that I've copied, and then we also want to set the domain equal to HTTP, and then the IP address, which we can grab from here, and /webhook. Nope, not /webhook. That's just the whole domain there. The next thing we need to do is log into the droplet and proxy those ports. So let's do that now. So now that I'm logged into the droplet, I want to run doku proxy ports add payments 80 to 4242. I missed a D there. It's add, not like advertisement. Add is in plus. All right, now that that's set up, let's head back to the browser and test our live application. So we'll wait for this to finish updating and doing its pre-flight checks. It sounds so cool. It's like we're gonna go on a trip somewhere. All right, so here we go. We'll open that up in the browser. By browsing to the IP address, we can say that we can see it. It says buy for $12. This is great. This is all expected. We click that buy button and walk through the payment flow one final time here, and we can see what this looks like when we receive the webhook event. So actually, before I hit pay there, I'm going to run in the terminal doku logs-t, just so that we can see that the webhook event is received by our droplet. So if I click pay, we should be receiving that checkout.session event, and that represents a successful payment. All right, still processing, and let's look in the logs here. Ooh, payment received. So we're automating some of that already. That's great. Our proof of concept for automation is good. And we were redirected back to the success URL on our live public droplet IP address. So that is all looking fantastic. All right, just for fun, let's take a look at that client-side code, the front end, and then we'll run back through a couple more payment flows. So first, let's crack open this front end code that lives inside of client, and open up script.js, which is where all of our application code lives for now. We have min and max photos. We have ways to update the quantity, kind of standard vanilla JS stuff that you would expect. This is the function that we're calling on the front end to create a checkout session. You'll notice that we're grabbing that input element for the quantity, the number of photos we want to purchase, and then we're sending that to the back end as part of our post body. We're also including the locale. So this will make that request to our server. It's sending that post request to our server that's going to create the checkout session. And here at the bottom, we're kind of just going to return the entire result of fetch. So we're going to return a promise from this create checkout session function. So after the page loads and we've got our publishable key and all of that set up, we are going to listen for a submit event or a click event that happens on that submit button, create the checkout session with the quantity and the locale. So this is being sent as soon as the button is clicked. We're sending the quantity and locale to the server to configure this checkout session to be exactly what we want. And then finally, we're calling redirect to checkout here on the front end, passing in that session ID that we get back from the server. And we're finally handling the results. So that's kind of what the front end looks like. All right, let's make this a little bit bigger for the folks in the back. And we will use this button to increase the quantity. We saw that on the front end, how we have a little bit of a click handler there for that. We'll click buy and redirect to the checkout page. And here, I wanted to demonstrate that you can use one of our test cards for SCA, and that will totally work. Let's see. Okay. And when you click pay in this case, we're going to prompt the user for authentication. This is a demo of what secure customer authentication might look like. Now in test mode, we are presenting the Stripe test payment page and completing authentication, but in practice, the bank's page would be populated in this modal. So we're going to complete authentication, and that kind of simulates what it would be like to go through the payment flow in an SCA ready way. All right, as that's finishing, we can head back through this whole process and see what it looks like to pay with Ideal and ShiroPay. So we'll restart the demo. This time we'll buy 3 photos and we'll pick Ideal as our payment method, and then we can select one of these banks. So we'll use this bank. Jenny Rosen is my favorite test customer, and we'll click pay. All right, we get to this authorized test payment test page, and that will authenticate and will be redirected back. So you kind of get a different flavor for what these payment method types feel like, at least in test mode. Again, in live mode, it's going to feel a little bit different and look a little different. All right, so that's paying with Ideal. Let's go through the flow now. Finally, with ShiroPay, we're going to put in our test customer again and click pay. And that is really it for authorizing a test payment for ShiroPay. Again, both of those payment method types will behave a little bit differently in live mode. While the Stripe samples are not meant for a production application, we hope that you'll find integrating Stripe easier with a full end-to-end proof of concept. And in order to take this to the next step, technically you just need to update those environment variables with some live mode API keys and a live mode price object, and then you can take real payments. That said, you'll likely want to use Stripe samples more as references just for the bits that fit well in your application. So just as a quick recap, we covered how you can install and configure the Stripe CLI and a Stripe sample that'll kickstart your development. Next, we showed how you might play with that locally and make some changes. And then later we showed how to create dev data and test your webhooks locally. And then we deployed that to DigitalOcean, to a DigitalOcean droplet with Doku and a Docker file to test on a live droplet. Thank you so much for joining us. I hope you found this helpful. I'm looking forward to chatting with you in the breakout session. Again, I'm CJ Avila, or @CJavDev on Twitter. Bye, friends.